Hey there, and welcome to another episode of One Email, Two Takes. I'm Will Allred. I'm joined by my co-host, Christina Finseth. If you haven't joined us before, what we do on this show is we take an email that was either sent directly to us or that someone has asked us to help them with. And we offer our perspective on their writing, but we also offer our two takes. And we rewrite that email as we would if we were sending it on our behalf to our own prospect. Now, quick intro. I'm Will Allred. I'm one of the co-founders at a company called Lavender. We have a Chrome extension that is used by thousands of sales reps to help them get more replies and get more positive replies faster. I'm joined by an advisor at Lavender, my co-host, the wonderful Christina Finseth. I'll let you introduce yourself.
No, thank you. If you are tuning in for the first time, I'm Christina Finseth. As Will alluded, I am an advisor at Lavender. I also am a senior manager of outbound growth marketing for Greenhouse, which means I get to work very closely with the SDR side of the business and doing some outbound stuff. So,
yeah. So this week we've got a couple emails lined up. So I'll share my screen so we can go through them. So Christina, let me give you some context on this week's email. So this was actually an email that I reviewed with an SDR yesterday. It's right in your wheelhouse because it's going directly into the HR department. And the person was like, I follow your stuff. I know that you're all about personalization and giving that context. So let me walk through the subject line as well as the actual copy of the email. Subject line is measure employee feedback. Hi, Will. I noticed you're an HR manager at said company. As part of the human resources team, one of the significant challenges is to create an engaged workforce to build a great culture. We at our company helped leaders like you measure and improve workplace culture. Is this something you would like to achieve at their company? Now, there's a couple of things. One, I noticed when he said to me, I'm using a framework that you've put out there, what he was talking about, which is I like to start with an observation. So I'm showing the person on the other end that I'm writing an email directly to them. And then I like to tie that observation back to a challenge. The problem I see here is that observation is a little too obvious, which Christina, I think you alluded to it as kind of, duh.
Yeah, like I know what my title is. It's a little generic. Yeah. It can scale, but everyone knows who they are and what their title is. So,
yeah, I did like how short it was. I mean, one of the things that stood out to me is it's fairly short. It's not a complex message. I did notice that this is probably more just me being an outsider to HR is the idea of workplace culture. I don't really get a sense for what the company does or what they provide. I'm not saying that my rewrite solved for that because again, I'm more of an outsider on this, but I don't know. Christine, from your perspective, would you say you walk away from this email with a concrete sense of what you get?
no. And, just to kind of elaborate on some of the things you've pointed out, just to give perspective on this too, depending on the size of the company, HR manager might be too generic of a title to reach out to for what they do anyway. And one of the things that I thought about here is some organizations have engagement managers or people managers that are responsible for culture, and that this might be more relevant to. So I'm a little worried that using something generic like HR manager and as part of the HR team could actually hurt how this message lands. The second piece is, and when we get to my rewrite, I think I'll be able to, I'm taking the same approach of putting pain forward or problems forward, but I'm not assuming that that's what they're going through. The language in this kind of says, I already know that this is a challenge and I bet it's something you'd like to achieve. And it's like, well, how do you know what work we've done to date? Can you actually see into what we've been doing to create an engaged workforce? Probably not
Right.
100% visibility there. So I feel like this is almost too assumptive and in somewhat of an off-putting way. But I do like
Yeah,
the length. I agree with you. And I can see that they tried to follow some framework.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing that I stood out to me, it was like one of those things that like took me a second to visualize it, but this word measure within the subject line. If I'm just an HR manager at a, part of an HR team at some company, XYZ, and I'm going through my inbox and I see measure employee feedback. In my mind, I'm already sort of categorized this as prospecting email, as a sales email, right? And one of my things when I think about like how people triage their inbox and how they go through is like, that's not really a categorization that you want them to make out of the gate. Yeah, you might stoke curiosity if it's like a top priority, but you've already got them in the mindset of like, okay, what's this pitch about? And if you're not like stating exactly what they get clearly on the other side, you're gonna shoot yourself in the foot. Um, I think an easy way to just improve the subject line would be to remove the word measure. Sort of, I've looked at it as like, you could have had better here. You could have had, you know, are you getting enough employee feedback, question mark? So like turning it into a question, making it a command like measure, or using like a superlative, those things kind of give it away before they've even opened or engaged with the email itself. Okay, so I think we've beaten up this email enough. What do you think?
I, I feel bad, but yeah, we just beat the crap out of that email. So maybe we should give something in return.
Yeah, well, okay, since we were so mean about this email, one thing I did like is the question here, which was um, it's almost like a pattern break to say like, hey, is this a challenge? And as opposed to the very standardized, like, is this of interest? Or, would you like to have a conversation about this next week at 2 p.m.? It's very much so like, hey, is that something you're trying to get into? Is that a priority? And I kind of took that and ran with it when I did my rewrite. So you'll see here, subject line, I just changed it up to 2 words. It could have been employee feedback. I just decided to go with culture read based on my understanding what the company does. And so I say, Christina, talking with HR leaders with fast growing teams, getting a read on the organization tends to be a top priority. As you've grown, have you found this to be a challenge? So leaning into that brevity, one of the things that I didn't necessarily have was like some piece of information to personalize off of. And so instead of, trying to go with this like light, fluffy, like, hey, I see you have X job title, I decided to dig in on the problems that tend to be at the companies that we tend to work with. And so it almost qualifies them out of the gate. And then I just ask them if it's a challenge. And I put it as sort of like a more colloquial sort of sounding, like get a read on what's going on, as opposed to like, trying to make it more formal or anything else. But what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you get the A+ on brevity for sure. It is short and sweet. I think, and here's the part that people I think don't think deep enough about. I know where you're going with this. Not only are you trying to get them to, obviously be enticed by how short and sweet it is, and you're asking a question that's not necessarily like a plug to sell them anything just yet. But as I read this psychologically, what I think about is what will this cause the recipient to potentially do? And it may be multiple actions. One might be that they might just write back, right? Which is like great. And they can say, we're not there yet. This is not priority. But because it's so short and it's such an interrupt to the normal sales emails in an inbox, it makes me want to click and research who this company is and where they fit in as to why they want to reach out to me about this potential challenge. And then I kind of can connect the dots, right? And decide like if it's worth writing back. So I don't think you have to give all that context in your email. I think it's just more about getting them curious.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, right? Like,
Yeah.
it makes me kind of like think through, like, could there be like signature line optimization there?
Yeah.
And I could like play around with what the signature says. Maybe there's a tagline, maybe there's a hyperlink to the company, maybe there's not. Maybe I see like what the difference is in response rate.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, this also banks, I talk about this all the time, but if you're going to take the curious route, it also banks on the fact that your website has to be very clear as soon as I land there, right? So, and you can control where they're landing if they are clicking into your signature block, right? So maybe you have a triggered landing page that you're tracking too, as an additional set of analytics here. But yeah, I'm with you. I think this generates some curiosity.
Cool. Appreciate that. The other thing I like with this too is like it gives you a lot of room to follow up.
Yeah.
Where I haven't like spilled all the beans about what we do. And so now I can sort of follow up and provide clarity.
Exactly.
All right. I want to see yours.
It
Oh
looks
yeah.
very familiar.
I love
I could not use this framework. This is the framework that keeps on giving. I am the kind of person, for those who don't know me, that test fairly frequently when it comes to copy. But as they say, if something ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
And this one is one of those frameworks that I continue to kind of pull back to, and I'm still actively running a cadence right now that has this as a first touch, or a variation of this as a first touch. And I'm seeing 4 to 5% reply rate just on that first touch, utilizing this. So just saying it works, but
Right.
Anyway.
I've seen it firsthand. You put it into place with lavender and it absolutely crushed it.
It works. And I think what's different about this and why I didn't call it a template is because it's more than just a variable that you have to switch out here. There is some thought process, but let me read through this. So my subject line, I just did employee happiness, right? Like, to me, I probably would click on that because I'm curious, like, what do you mean? My happiness as an HR manager, like, I don't know how I'm feeling. But I just felt like maybe it would be a little bit different than like the typical employee engagement, employee feedback, things like that. And so I took this position. Will, in chatting with other HR leaders, 2 of the problems they're experiencing are measuring employee engagement, turning employee feedback into action plans. We're helping companies like X and Y strengthen the culture through acknowledging employee feedback and taking action. Curious if you struggle with the same, open to a quick chat. So I tried to hit on the fact that this is what's different from the original, is I am being assumptive still around problems, but I'm being assumptive through the lens of I've talked to other HR leaders that are saying this, right? And I'm not assuming that they're struggling with it. I'm curious if they are, and if this is hitting them, like, let's chat. But this tends to work really well as a format.
Yeah. And what's cool about starting it this way is you create almost like a psychological safety to be like, me too. Right.
Yeah,
it's like,
exactly.
Yeah, I also deal with number 1. I don't actually know how to go about that. We've tried X, Y, and Z and it sucks.
Or number 2, I'm collecting feedback, but how do I put that into action? That tends to be a problem with companies. Just thinking back to my experience as employees, I just tried to synthesize what I felt were main areas that they could solve for.
Yeah. And I like this, this little visual separator because it's a pattern break. Most people don't use like an N or an M dash to create visual separation. They'll just use like a period, or they'll put it on to a different line. But you basically have a statement here, and then you make your ask, which is open to a quick chat.
Yeah. And honestly, I also see it as a way to kind of cheat and ask 2 questions with 1 question mark. So, yeah, it's like cheating the system. But yeah, so
You
that's
know that the data says, one question performs better than two, and so you just snuck them into one.
I mean, yeah, like I said, cheating the system. But yeah, I mean, again, this format works well. And so if you're selling into a different industry, you can easily take this and change out who you're speaking with, points 1 and 2, and
Seems
that
like it.
value prop, right? Like,
Yeah.
and scale this.
Yeah, tons you can do with experimentation here, right? Because like you can switch out the subject line, you can change how you talk about the problems, maybe you change out the X and Y here. Maybe you change out exactly what they're getting on the other side. Several things that you can like plug and play with and start to get a feel for. Just, making sure that you actually know why you're experimenting the way you're experimenting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Well,
it.
another one email, two takes in the books. If you don't already, follow Sales Hacker. This rewrite usually goes out through their email newsletters on Tuesdays and is posted to their YouTube I think it's Monday at this point. They used to do Tuesday, now it's Monday. But if you enjoyed, follow along. Thanks, y'all.